Okay, I'm going to talk about this titan named Hyperion. Sometimes he's called Helios, but he had a son named Helios. But it was a titan. He was murdered by Kronos and Iapetus. So I'm going to read from Diodorus Siculus's Library of History again. This is the account given in their myth. Their first king was Uranus, and he gathered the human beings who dwelt in scattered habitations within the shelter of a walled city, and caused his subjects to cease from their lawless ways and their bestial manner of living, discovering for them the uses of cultivated fruits, how to store them up, and not a few other things which are of benefit to man. And he also subdued the larger part of the inhabited earth, in particular the regions to the west and the north. And since he was a careful observer of the stars, he foretold many things which would take place throughout the world. And for the common people, he introduced the year on the basis of the movement of the sun and the months of that of the moon, and instructed them in the seasons which recur year after year. Consequently, the masses of the people, being ignorant of the internal arrangement of the stars and marveling at the events which were taking place as he had predicted, conceived that the man who taught such things partook of the nature of the gods. And after he had passed from among men, they accorded to him immortal honors, both because of his benefactions and because of his knowledge of the stars. And then they transferred his name to the firmament of heaven, both because they thought that he had been so intimately acquainted with the risings and the settings of the stars, and with whatever else took place in the firmament, and because they would surpass his benefactions by the magnitude of the honors which they would show him, in that for all subsequent time they proclaimed him to be the king of the universe. To Uranus, the myth continues, were born 45 sons from a number of wives, and of these 18, it is said, were by Titia, each of them bearing a distinct name, but all of them as a group were called after their mother Titans. Titia, because she was prudent and had brought about many good deeds for the people, was deified after her death by those whom she had helped, and her name was changed to Ge, or that would be Gaia. To Uranus were also born daughters, the two eldest of whom were by far the most renowned above the others, and were called Basilea and Rhea, whom some also named Pandora. Of these daughters, Basilea, who was the eldest and far excelled the others in both prudence and understanding, reared all of her brothers, showing them collectively a mother's kindness. Consequently, she was given the appellation of Great Mother. And after her father had been translated from the among men into the circle of the gods with the approval of the masses and of her brothers, and she succeeded to the royal dignity, though she was still a maiden, and because of her exceedingly great chastity, had been unwilling to unite in marriage with any man. But later, because of her desire to leave sons who should succeed to the throne, she united in marriage with Hyperion, one of her brothers, for whom she had the greatest affection. And when there were born to her two children, Helios and Selene, who were greatly admired for both their beauty and their chastity, the brothers of Basilea, they say, being envious of her because of her happy issue of children, and fearing that Hyperion would divert the royal power to himself, committed an utterly impious deed. For entering into a conspiracy among themselves, they put Hyperion to the sword, and casting Helios, who was still in years a child, into the Eridanus river, drowned him. When this crime came to light, Selene, who loved her brother very greatly, threw herself down from the roof. But for his mother, while seeking his body along the river, her strength left her, And falling into the swoon, she beheld a vision in which she thought that Helios stood over her and urged her not to mourn the death of her children, for he said the Titans would meet the punishment which they deserve, while he and his sister would be transformed by some divine providence into immortal natures, since that which had formerly been called the holy fire in the heavens would be called by men Helios, the sun, and that addressed as Mene would be called Selene, the moon. When she was aroused from the dream or the swoon, she recounted to the common crowd both the dream and the misfortunes which had befallen her, asking that they rendered to the deed honors like those accorded to the gods, and asserting that no man should thereafter touch her body. And after this, she became frenzied, and seizing such of her daughter's playthings as could make a noise, she began to wander over the land with her hair hanging free, inspired by the noise of the kettle drums and cymbals, so that those who saw her were struck with astonishment, and all men were filled with pity at her misfortune, and some were clinging to her body, when there came a mighty storm, and continuous crashes of thunder and lightning, and in the midst of this Basilea passed from sight, whereupon the crowds of people, amazed at the reversal of fortune, transferred the names and the honors of Helios and Selene to the stars of the sky, and as for their mother, they considered her to be a goddess, and erected altars to her, and imitating the incidents of her life by the pounding of the kettle drums and the clash of the cymbals, they rendered unto her in this way sacrifices and all honors. However, and then, okay, so I'm going to stop. So it continues on. There was another account of Phrygia. It was a similar type story, but she went on, and she was followed by a gentleman named Marsyas, who loved her, but he got a fight with another Apollo, not the son of Zeus, but this would be a different Apollo, and Apollo killed him and then was remorseful. But basically, that Titan was killed by Kronos, Iapetus, and maybe some of the other Titans. What's interesting is they called the gods the stars and the planets, and because the patriarch Uranus was familiar with how things worked, they started to associate him with the gods of the sky. Read this one last paragraph. After the death of Hyperion, the myth relates, the kingdom was divided among the sons of Uranus, the most renowned of whom were Atlas and Cronus. Of these sons, Atlas received as his part the regions of the coast of the ocean, and he not only gave the name of Atlanteans to his people, but likewise called the greatest mountain in the land Atlas. They also say that he perfected the science of astrology and was the first to publish to mankind the doctrine of the sphere, and it was for this reason that the idea was held that the entire heavens were supported upon the shoulders of Atlas, the myth darkly hinting this way at his discovery and description of the sphere. Okay, so I just told you, and I've done this in a previous video, that Atlas is also Iapetus. He would be one of your fallen watchers who taught astrology, but he was he and Cronus divided the kingdom, and the Mount Atlas is over in the northern part of Africa. And I've told you in my other videos that Cronus ended up in ancient Phoenicia, Tyre, and Byblos, and then his children went down all over into Europe and the Middle East. Okay, that's it for that.